Hey everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarin. Of course, I'm joined by Mr. Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. You got a haircut, I see.
Yep, fine.
I heard you were. Somebody asked you on another podcast if you were wearing a piece.
I've demonstrated so many times that this is just hair. I don't know what to say. What do you mean?
You know, it is a huge discussion on some hair loss message boards about Paul Thurrott's hair and if it's real or not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a huge
deal. What do you
deal.
want me to do? I had my hair shaved on live.
Nobody believes it. They think it's all a work, as they say in the
like
wrestling
it's an
business.
Area 51 video.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like look, if we can fake the moon landing, Thurrott's hair is
yeah
easy.
How you feeling today, Paul? I know last week you were not feeling well.
Yeah, no, better than last week.
Yeah, we had to end the show abruptly.
Yep. That's never happened. I was trying to think like several hundred podcasts in. That's probably the first.
So we're almost at 300. Episode 300 is coming up. I forgot what number this is, but we're almost at 300. We're planning on possibly doing something special for everybody. We're trying to work that out. Maybe it's going to happen. Maybe it's not. That's all I'm going to say. But I'm glad that you're feeling better. We have so much to talk about this week. A lot is happening. I had a couple topics I wanted to talk about. Before we go into it, I wanted to touch on something that I saw this week, and I was curious as to
the importance of it.
The importance of it, what I missed. Why is everybody reporting that Windows Phone is dead? Why again? Why is this happening again?
Why now?
Why? Yeah, why? I mean,
well, because all right. So as part of Microsoft's quarterly earnings last week, they revealed in a 10, I almost called it a 10K filing, a 10Q filing, I think it's called, a SEC filing, that they sold an abysmal number of Lumia phones. And, jump-starting the Windows Phone is dead kind of thing. So, my stance on this is that actually nothing has changed since last July in the sense that Microsoft is simply going through with the strategy they laid out at the time. Remember, they had it was actually $8 billion-ish in write-downs or write-offs related to the Nokia purchase and its Windows Phone business. And they have a new strategy going forward. They're going to sell fewer phones. They're only going to sell them via select carriers. They're only going to sell them to particular audience groups, obviously enthusiasts, business customers, and also, value phones. And
isn't that what they're doing right now?
It's literally what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
The thing is, since they announced that in July, 2 quarters have expired. And the thing that's happened in both of those quarters with regards to Windows Phone is that they have sold half as many phones as they used to, which in some ways shouldn't surprise people, I guess, because, again, they're not selling as many phones in as many places. And they're not trying very hard to sell them, But I have all these kinds of theories about this stuff. But if you think back to when the Lumia 950, 950 XL finally came out, they hadn't shipped
18 months.
A flagship phone in 18 months. Very expensive phones, and you could sort of make the argument, in this day and age when Microsoft is never going to catch up with Apple and Android, especially in the flagship area, why wouldn't you drop the price a little bit just to make them a little bit more attractive? And my theory is that this actually falls into that whole strategy thing where they were selling phones at a loss over the past, the year previous to that. And they said, look, we can't afford to do this because the more of these things we sell, we don't make up any share in the wider market. It's not helping us. We're losing money on every single one of these things. And I think with the 950, 950 XL, they said, you know what, we're going to sell this thing for what it really costs. And I think this is something that people aren't used to, because we're, especially here in the United States, when it comes to smartphones, we're used to paying much less than, or we think it's much less, we pay much less up front, whatever.
It's worked into the payments, yeah.
Yeah, so you see the actual cost of the phone, and I think people kind of freak out. And my recommendation kind of at the time with the 950, 950 XL was like, look, you need to know what you're getting into, but they're too expensive. I thought they were too expensive. It didn't make sense to me. And I think that's part of it. And so,
I think it was shockingly expensive for a lot of people.
For what it was.
A lot of people were shocked that they went with that price point with those phones, and they thought maybe they would do like a Google thing where it'd be, cheaper phone, but it would entice people to jump in.
Yeah, Google almost certainly loses money on Nexus, by the way. They don't really talk about that. There was a passing reference to some of their business costs in their own financial disclosure this week, and the Nexus was one of the items in the list where they basically said this is a cost, and the cost was related to it was a cost in the quarter, the process of acquiring new phone designs.
But let me say this, Paul, for Google, now that they have their own carrier, the whatever they call it, the Fi, what do they call it? I forgot the name.
Fi,
the Google Fi. Now that they're technically their own carrier, don't they? Yeah, they're losing money on the phone, but isn't the concept that, you're going to lose money on the Nexus phone, but you're going to entice people to sign up for their service?
Yeah, and not just for the service, but for all Google services, or many Google services. But that was always the theory behind Microsoft and Lumia and that purchase, and that if we sell these things at a loss, they're going to get people into the ecosystem. You lose a little money on a phone, but you have a lifelong customer of Office 365, let's say. The reason that never really worked for them is that, they're the minority phone platform, and that never really amounted to much. They are probably doing much better already on iOS and Android than they ever did on Windows Phone. And, it's sad. It's a sad. But, unfortunately, because I'm a big Windows Phone fan, and so I think some people read what I write and they contort it into, why do you hate Windows Phone now? What happened? Or whatever. It's not really about me. I mean, I've always tried to accurately reflect what's going on, and over the past year, I've written more about Microsoft apps and other mobile platforms because I think that's where things are going. I still use a Windows Phone, as you've seen it, and I use other phones, as you've seen them as well. And I try to be as accurate as I can in depicting how this thing is doing in the market, where it succeeds, where it falls short, that kind of thing. And so this is kind of, for me, this is one's kind of tough because it's very personal, for people. I've had people today suggest that I stop writing about Windows Phone because obviously I hate it now, and you've made your point, and let's move on. And it's like, you misunderstand my job. I will be writing about Windows Phone, Windows Mobile, whatever you want to call it, for the foreseeable future. There's no way around that. I write about Windows,
I mean,
write about Microsoft.
The reality is there's a shift, obviously, over the last 18 months, right? They didn't put out decent hardware, but in the last 18 months, there's been a tremendous shift on the Microsoft front when it comes to what their focus is. And it seems like services really is their focus at this point. I have Cortana on my OnePlus now.
Right, and this is the mobility of
that's a new
thing.
Microsoft, really. Yeah, I mean, would that have happened?
I do this, if I'm out in the living room and I have my iPhone and I want to listen to music or whatever, I bring up the Microsoft Groove app. That's what I use for music. It's on all of my devices. That's what I use. I use Microsoft Outlook for email and for calendar. It's like these things. I use the MSN News app, which I think is fantastic for news aggregation. These things are all out there. You sign in with your Microsoft account and you're good to go. And it's not the Microsoft hardware platform, but it is in many ways the platform. And if you have access to an Android phone, you have better integration capabilities because, like you said, you have Cortana, which works way better on Android. But you also have the ability to run Microsoft lock screen replacements, Microsoft launcher replacements. That they don't turn it into Windows Phone. In fact, in many ways, they don't look anything like Windows Phone, but they provide you with a unique Microsoft-oriented user experience in both cases. So, this is like a lot of 2016. I will be writing and we'll be talking about this kind of stuff because I think this is where things are going when it comes to mobile and Microsoft.
Talk about phones. You want to give me that what is it? The 830 you have?
Yeah, 930. Yeah, I was gonna. Yep, I will bring it. I was gonna ask you if you still wanted that.
Yes, of course I do. For me, it kind of sucks because I talk about the experience and I pride myself in not being biased when it comes to products. I use a Mac. I use a PC. I have desktops all around me. I have an Android phone. I have an iPhone. I have an iPad. I have an Android tablet. But I really am out of the Windows Phone experience. I have a 640, which really is not a Windows Phone experience. I mean, it's a crappy experience if you really think about it. So
actually, that's not horrible. I mean, and
you know what? It wasn't horrible when I got it. I was actually shocked how well it worked.
I mean, I would consider, putting the Windows Insider preview on there, getting onto Windows 10 Mobile, resetting it, starting from scratch, and going from there. But the 930 would be a better experience. I think I'll have to look at it. I think I blew it back to 8.1 or whatever, but
yeah, I'll put the insider build. So I want to be in the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like to know when people say things like Windows Phone sucks because. I want to say, well, yeah, it does suck because of that, or no, you're doing it wrong. Like with Windows 10, you hear the complaints constantly. People complain about certain things, and it's very specific.
Sorry,
it's very specific complaints.
Well, I think of this thing in very high level terms. I mean, the problem with Windows Phone doesn't suck. I mean, Windows Phone is kind of an awesome platform. It's just that the apps aren't there.
The apps, yeah.
And so, there's high profile apps that have things you can replace them with, like Google Maps isn't there. And you can say, well, obviously we have a Maps app on Windows Phone that's fine. And we have ways.
Unless Paul, you're trying to walk around the city. Then you're going to walk around in a circle trying to find the restaurant.
Okay. Which actually I've done. But the issue is not so much the big stuff, although there is some big stuff, obviously, that's not a Windows Phone, Sonos, whatever. And the issue is it's a little squishier than that. The apps tend to be much better on iOS in particular, Android and iOS, than they are on Windows Phone. So if you think about things like the Kindle app, the New York Times app, those kinds of things where the app actually does exist on Windows Phone, it's often much better on other platforms. But then what it really is the million plus small apps that are very individualized. If I commuted into Boston every day, which I don't, I would need a specific kind of parking app to park my car at the MBTA lot, and I would need a specific app to buy tickets on the train.
Yeah, wow.
These do not exist on Windows Phone. Yeah. And so if you are a Boston area commuter, you're out of luck. And that type of thing is replicated across the world in every way, shape, and form. Sure. And so there were always exceptions, but here in the United States, for example, banking apps are pretty much non-existent. Worldwide mobile payment apps, mobile payment capabilities, pretty much impossible to do on Windows.
So why isn't it an option? Why hasn't this happened to Microsoft contacts the developers of the top 20 most functional apps? I'm not talking about Zuzu Zaza gaming, I'm not talking about Candy Crush. I'm not talking about those gimmicky games. I'm talking about, legitimate application, Chase, Citibank, all these, major applications that people are using worldwide. Why aren't they going to the developers? Why aren't they going to the companies and enticing them to develop the application for them? I know that the whole thing has been universal apps, and maybe their concept is, well, if we wait till the universal app structure becomes big and people start doing it, they'll come over. But why hasn't this been a thing where they've contacted, I'm just going to throw Instagram out there, right? Like, is there an Instagram app at this point? An official Instagram app?
Yeah, but it hasn't been updated in about 2 years.
Okay, so let's use Instagram as an example. Why aren't they going to companies like an Instagram or a Snapchat or whoever and saying, listen, guys, we want to entice you. Here's a couple bucks. Develop the app for us. Put it in our store.
So, Andrew, let me stop you right there.
It's a little bit of payola, but...
No. What you've just described was Microsoft's strategy for Windows Phone, codename Apollo, which became known as Windows Phone 8. And so 3-4 years ago, whenever that thing was in development, it was literally this exact time of year. I got their entire internal roadmap, projections, all their plans, and what it involved was them going to the top 20, let's say, I don't remember the exact number, but app maker. In other words, what are we missing that's on Android and iOS? Okay, let's find the list. Here it is. Let's go to them and say, we will pay for the development of this app. We will upkeep it for you even. We'll just do it ourselves. When that doesn't work, we're going to hire a third party, and we're going to create an alternative that will tie into those APIs that are maybe available through that major service, and we'll make the alternative. That did nothing. And I didn't get this. This I did not get directly from Microsoft, but at least not officially. But
what do you mean it did nothing? I mean, they just didn't
work. Because it's years later and it didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, Kick just updated. Ichu in our chat says Kick updated the first time in 3 years on Windows Phone today.
Okay,
that's devastating.
I mean, that's very typical. Sadly, I was told off the record by somebody that of the people who took advantage of this offer from Microsoft. And this is primarily third parties, not the major services. In other words, I don't know. Let's say Instagram at the time. Actually, Instagram at the time didn't agree to make a Windows Phone app. So, some third party said, "I'll make an Instagram app for you," and Microsoft said, "Great, here's $250,000, whatever the price was," and they made the app, and then they walked away from it. They just did it to get the money.
Yeah.
That happened a bunch of times, apparently. That one, that's it's not officially on the record type information, but
Yeah.
that's what I heard. And there's not much you can do when the market is going like this, and your platform is doing this. Microsoft could show X amount of growth in number of phones. It looks like a big number, but it's a big number of a small, a big percentage of a small number is a very small number. And so iOS, Android are going flying up, and Windows Phone never did. So
yeah, I mean
that's the way it is. It's just too bad.
That's I don't know. I don't know what the listen. The hope is that more.
We've talked about this stuff.
I
Right?
know.
Remember the the primary benefit of Windows Phone in the beginning. You can go back. I wrote about this probably a year ago. So if you go back and look at it, it was really interesting. They looked at what phones were like, and they said, we're going to make a phone that's centered on the user. What does that look like? In other words, the theory here is we're not going to make something different to be different. What would make a phone better? And that's what resulted in all those integrated experiences, the hubs and so forth, that they later had to turn everything off because it didn't work in real life. Because to me as a potential Windows Phone user, it sounds very, very exciting and very interesting. The possibility of having, let's say, like a Photos hub where, obviously the camera's tied into it, but all of the photo apps that I might have on my system, all the photo services that are out in the world, whether at the time it was like Snapfish and, Flickr and Google Photos, or whatever they called it back then, and obviously OneDrive and everything. It's all in one place. And it sounds like to the user, this kind of system is great. It's a great idea. The problem is the user's not the one putting the apps on the phone. It's the services that are doing it. And so the Flickrs, the Google Photos, whoever of the world, they looked at this thing and they said, well, hold on a second. First of all, you have no users at all. Now what you want me to do is give up my brand so that I can be part of this thing that's in your brand. And I'm not going to do that. Facebook didn't want to be integrated into the People Hub and the calendar and the chat app. Facebook wants you to run Facebook. Facebook wants you to run later Facebook Messenger. Facebook wants you to run Facebook stuff. They don't want you to think of this as a Windows feature. And they certainly don't want you to not think about it at all. They want you to think Facebook. And so that system, which on the surface sounds like such a great idea, was a terrible idea for Microsoft's would-be partners. It's too bad.
It is too bad. No,
it's one of those things you hear. It's like, oh, that's so cool, but it just doesn't really.
I think the cool thing was, you're kind of right. Those everything being integrated in Windows Phone was cool. The fact that all these apps kind of looked the same was kind of cool. It was very unique for the platform. Yeah. And when they lost that, and I understand why they lost that. They kind of have to conform, and all these apps look the same universally on all platforms at this point. It kind of hurt them. And they never recovered. They didn't have the development of these apps continue. And you're right. It's absolutely sad.
Yeah.
And is that why Windows Phone is dead? To kind of go full circle on this?
There's no, yes, but it's part of why. Like you can't, there's no one thing, timing was one of the things, BlackBerry 10 didn't make it either. It's timing plays a role. I guess the thing that bugs me about it is, first of all, the way that people react to me like I'm some kind of antichrist because I'm telling you the truth, I'm sorry, I'm not like Fox News or Nazi Germany. I'm trying to help you here, not to just spout the party line. That bothers me, but the thinking behind Windows Phone was clear, and it was good, and it was consumer focused, and it wasn't just copy Apple. And I sort of always really appreciated that. The one thing with Android in the beginning, one of the big chips on my shoulder that I still have a hard time with Android is like, Android is just the same frickin' thing. It's just like, let's copy that and then we'll take it from there. And I just, it's too bad.
Well, you could tell, Android tablet sales, as far as Samsung sales, right? and Nexus sales, it's really, I think tablet sales in general have plummeted.
Why is it though that, for example, maybe it is the same. I guess if you added up all the tablets in the world, the majority of them are Android, and so they're outselling iPhone. Is that right? I can't even. I've written about this.
You mean iPad?
iPad, yeah.
I mean, they would. I would imagine they would be outselling iPad tremendously because it's every tablet is an Android tablet. But if you want to do a fair comparison, let's compare Google's Nexus line. Let's compare Samsung's line, which those are pretty much the only two top name brand Android-based tablets out there. How are they doing compared to the iPad? I guarantee you they're not doing well at all. I don't know anybody that's going and buying a Samsung Galaxy, whatever they call it. I listen, but and I say that, and I know people are going to say, "Well, I just bought one, and I just bought one." Yes, we're not. When most people are going and buying iPad Minis, or they're buying $35 tablets.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And by the way, that was one of the big growth points for that quarter was the Amazon cheapo tablet. Yeah, it looks like Apple sold 24% of tablets for all of last year, so just a quarter of them. So three out of four were not iPad. I'm positive that the iPad or the iPad line or some version of the iPad was the number one selling tablet. There's no way that's not the case. Although we don't know that exactly. They don't really break it down like that. But it's interesting, and of course, Apple. Everyone knows Apple makes all the money, so we don't have to worry about that part of it.
Well, I mean, you look at tablet sales, right? For Apple, you look at iPad sales, and they're down tremendously year to year. People are just. I don't think people are buying tablets like they did. I think people who bought it have it now, and there's no reason to update. I mean, there are people I know that with iPad 2s, and they're really happy with it.
Yeah. So I think it's a new market, and I think we're just figuring out now what the what the refresh rate looks like. I mean, with phones, it's been very clear cut. It's basically every 2 years. Not obviously, but interestingly, that may actually accelerate because of programs like the Apple upgrade program, the iPhone upgrade program they have. But let's say every 2 years. I think people, Apple included, sort of assumed that would be the case with tablets. But I think people are not as excited about tablets as they are about phones because they can't put it in their pocket and take it with them at all times.
Well, I think a lot of the allure with the tablet, you touch on this, the life cycle of a phone is every 2 years for a lot of people. They buy a new phone every 2 years and they go in every 2 years or a year and a half, whatever. I think it's getting shorter and shorter with these trade-in policies now for once a year now with phones. But for tablets, we did see a trend where every year or every 2 years people are getting a new one of these. There's no reason to do that. At first, you got, between the original iPad and the iPad Air, I know people that went and bought a new one every single year.
Yeah, but that's not very typical, and certainly is not typical anymore. And I think, as the PC life cycle has kind of extended out, the tablet one has too. It's not as big, I don't think. We don't know, but my just kind of common sense thinking about it, I think the refresh rate on tablets is probably going to be somewhere about half what it is on PCs.
So why do you think that the lifespan of PCs have extended out? Because I do believe that. I do believe that that's absolutely true. I was one of these people that every 2 to 3 years I was updating and I was getting a new PC. Mm-hmm. I've had this one since 2011, and really there's no reason for me to upgrade. Now,
with the exception of certain markets that I think should just be obvious to people like gamers or whatever, people who enthusiasts, whatever. For the vast majority of people, before 2007, 2010, somewhere in there, PC was where you did everything. It was the only thing. When it came to personal computing, it was all you had. And so you tended to do more on the device. It got used harder. Might have been used between more people a lot of the time. And it was the screen, Now we have phones and tablets. We don't use it as much. And the PC has settled into something that I really like. Because this is how I've always used the PC, as a productivity device only. And so I look at my kids as kind of a lot more normal usage patterns than me. But even for myself, if I come to New York this week, for example, I will bring a PC, and the only thing on it is work stuff. I use it to work. That's all I use it for. If I'm going to watch Netflix for some reason on this trip, or a movie of any kind, or read a book, or post on Facebook, or whatever, that happens on a small tablet, or it happens on a phone, depending on the circumstance. It doesn't happen on the PC. And so it allows you to stretch out the lifetime of that thing, right? Because you're not using it as much. You don't need it as much. Yeah. My kids need the PC to print, basically. I hesitate to tell them that.
And what a miserable experience that is.
Well, no. And to write certain things, like my By the way, my son is taking a class called genocide. Can you believe that?
I took a Holocaust literature class.
It made me question why he needed that skill. And it also led to me saying the sentence, I need you to be better at genocide.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that I think that they could probably print from their devices too. Because I printed in my home from Android. It actually does work.
Yeah, I have a
but
big
it's content creation.
Right? I have a big problem with this with printers. I absolutely hate printers. They all suck. 20 years of my life I have spent battling a printer to print properly. I just know it never works. And there's always some sort of problem. There's some sort of spool error. There's something happening. There's a jam. I have this. I have an HP LaserJet underneath here. I was so close, Paul. This thing is gigantic. It's like 500 pounds. It's like a gigantic LaserJet. It's like an office LaserJet. I was so close the other day. All I needed to do was print my my insurance card for my car. Mm-hmm. It took me about 45 minutes for me to print. It failed. It printed in the wrong color. It was the most insane. I almost ripped this thing out and threw it out of the window in the middle of the snow. So I don't care. I just want to get rid of it. And I'm screaming at my wife, why do we have this thing? It's the worst thing ever. I need a new printer. And I'm looking at, brother has these amazing printers now, and they're like this big, and they're all LaserJet. I mean, it's the most unbearable experience ever to print anything.
Oh, well, how often do you have to print really?
I you know what's funny? I used to print about 2.5 years ago. I probably stopped about 2 years ago. Every one of my show notes, I used to print out on a piece of paper. Every one of them. And I stopped doing it because my printer stopped working properly. And now I do everything, but I like having I always have a pen in my hand when I'm doing a show, and I like to write down a thought. Like if you're talking, I'll write down something I want to bring up.
You'll actually write it down.
I'll actually write it down. And it's my weird process of doing this. But I absolutely hate it. I absolutely hate printers. They should be outlawed. Why can't we get someone in that says, we don't need printers anymore?
I can't believe my kids ever use printers. I very rarely. I'll print I actually do print my train ticket, but it's kind of like a backup.
Yeah, I print.
I don't really. Yeah. I don't really need it. I mean, unless I use Windows Phone because there's no hand drive.
So I want to talk about something. I want to touch on this before I forget. We always talk about like the little features that are improvements. Like, we watched the Apple conference, right? We watched the Apple keynote, and they go down this list of stupid little tiny improvements within OS 10 that at that moment we say, well, who the hell cares, right? Like, oh, that's so dumb that they're taking the time to do this. I want to tell you this stupid little improvement in OS 10 that has made my life so easy and has simplified everything I do. So I sign a bunch of contracts constantly, agreements, partnership agreements, advertising deals, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And they always send over a PDF, and I have to fill out the PDF, and I have to send it back to them. And it's easy. You can modify a PDF, obviously. You could edit a PDF. You could fill in the blanks. But you can't really sign a PDF with your signature. You could do like a BS, font that signs it, but that's not the right way of doing it.
And if you have a pen-compatible Windows computer.
A pen-compatible Windows computer, sure.
Sure, like a Surface.
In OS 10, there is now a feature that you could either, on your trackpad, sign it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or
yes.
You could actually sign a piece of paper, right? Hold it up to the webcam, and it takes the signature perfectly, and you could plug it in.
Pretty good.
I mean, it's such a tiny improvement.
No, that's
I was blown away on how easy this has made my life.
No, that's smart.
Apple's
smart.
I mean, isn't that like such a... Why didn't anybody do this about, I don't know, 20 years ago? How long have we had webcams and cameras? 10, 15 years? Cameras and laptops, sorry. Cameras and laptops. 15 years? Right? Like, you think about something like that, and you're like, it's so stupid. It should have been in there for a while. So I just wanted to bring that up before we move on, because it's like a tiny little improvement, and we always overlook these tiny... We want big... we want to hear, 50% faster. And if you ask Apple, everything is 200 times faster from the previous model. But, we want these kind of features. But it's the small little things like this that I was blown away that this is actually a thing. I didn't even know until someone told me. I was like, oh my God, this is This is amazing.
Well, okay. I mean, what you're describing is something that some people wouldn't need or wouldn't think they need, and they'd be like, whatever. But I mean, I think that's the point. Like, you build these kind of things, and when you don't have this capability, you miss it. You know?
Yeah.
That's a cool thing. That's really nice. I mean, in fact, I would say that even though in some ways the ability to actually write with a pen on a Windows computer, if you had that capability, would be sort of more sophisticated. What you're describing is something that would benefit everybody.
So I want to go to this, since this is kind of tying in with everything we're talking about, and I want to get the chat room involved in here. We got 230 people in the chat right now listening and watching. I want to talk about, since we're talking about the way that things have been done and how things have changed in the PC world. How has your computer usage changed over the last 10 years? Right? Like, let's go back to 2006. Obviously, some smartphones existed. They weren't really smart, but they were still smartphones for the time. What has changed the most? What has changed for you as far as using a computer? I think media consumption is the thing that's totally changed for me.
Using a computer.
Using a PC.
Yeah.
What has changed for you over the last 10 years? What are you doing now that you didn't do, or what are you not doing anymore?
Like, what have I added?
What have you added? What have you removed?
Well, I mean, so there are the big things we just talked about where I think, like I said, everything used to be on a PC. When I used to go on a road trip, I would, I'd get my Zune collection going on the laptop. I'd make sure everything was synced over. Back then, you had to sync your podcast to the device. Then you would sync those to the phone that you had or whatever, maybe an MP3 player or whatever it was. Wasn't a phone. This is pre-phones. So you had that, there's that kind of change, right? So the nice thing about a PC compared to, say, like an iPad or a phone is storage, right? And so you would have a hard drive, and you could put all these movies on it, or you could attach a USB hard drive. You'd bring that with you, and that was very convenient. The downside of a computer compared to an iPad or a phone, actually, especially back then, was battery life. And so the fact that you had this content that you could watch on the device was really neat, but you were also using the battery life you might need to get work done as well. And so I like the division of work versus kind of personal stuff, entertainment. I think that's one big change. That's maybe the biggest change. But the other thing I guess I would point to off the top of my head is that I install virtually everything online now. And I used to have to keep all these offline installers. And actually, it's less efficient to do it that way because these things are updated so much now too, And so the only thing I actually install offline today, like literally the only application I think, is Photoshop. And the only reason I do that is because I don't use the big Photoshop. I use Photoshop Elements. And so it actually, in that case, because it's like a gigabyte download or something, it actually makes sense for me to put that thing on a server in my house, or like a NAS device now in my house, and install it over the home network. If I was using Photoshop CC, or whatever they call it now, actually you'd use the online installer. And so in that case, I would have gone to a 100% online installer type thing. But I use a lot of web apps, and I use some apps that are just you just download them from the internet. Office 365, for example, you download Office directly from them. You don't have the disk or whatever. You don't walk around with a Office install somewhere. So I think those are the two big ones.
I'm gonna read some of the stuff from the chat. Let's see. Yep. I'm gonna go down here. Biggest is no optical drive. Right?
Yeah.
That's changed tremendously. No paper, thus no printer. Playing games using Steam. Don't even have a DVD drive anymore.
Playing games, actually, that's another one. Playing games on a Xbox. That's been a big change, because I was a PC gamer, from the beginning, from 93-ish or whatever that was, all the way through Xbox 360. In fact, with the Xbox, the original Xbox, I did play some of those games like Halo and stuff, but I still preferred PC gaming. And when the 360 was coming out, whatever that year was, 2005 probably, I made the resolution I was going to do this. I was going to stop worrying about games on the computer, and I was going to learn the controller and just deal with it. And I basically never looked back, although, obviously there's been some PC gaming stuff this year.
I think online content consumption has been the biggest change. YouTube was in its infancy at that point, and when it came out, it was something really special about the service. Obviously, that nobody had even come close to them at that point. I mean, what was competing with YouTube at that point? I mean, there were a bunch
Nothing.
of small little
Nothing. I
video
mean,
sites, E-Bombs World, right? They had video stuff, but nothing to
yeah, but
the level
and it's,
of
I would argue today there's nothing basically. I mean,
it's
the
Daily
way
Motion. They're the only ones, but really,
well, no, but I mean the way YouTube has expanded into so many areas. I mean, um,
it's mainstream.
I don't, YouTube is amazing.
Yeah,
I would say, by the way, someone you mentioned someone talking about Steam. Steam is another example of that's an online installer. You have to download Steam via computer, but the games are in the cloud. That's how that works.
well, you know what's really changed the fact that you could literally type in any video, anything from any era in YouTube, and you could find it. I did this today. I looked up a video of this wrestler Terry Funk in 1980 or 1983 screaming forever. I wrote Terry Funk forever, and there's a clip of him in Japan yelling forever over and over again. First of all, who are these people uploading these clips?
Right.
Right? Like that's what I look for, and I found it within 30 seconds. It would have been virtually impossible 10 years ago to find that clip in a decent format for me to see. It would have taken me, I would have had to go on a forum. I would have had to ask that forum, and some guy would have had to look at it in a week from now and give me a link to his, personal video that he has. That's what's really changed. Cloud computing, that's the other thing. I'm not hoarding data anymore.
There's almost nothing that you couldn't think of and find immediately online right now, right? That's amazing. I mean, I was making playlists actually in Groove the other day, and I was thinking, this group, I back in the day, I had like a VHS tape of this concert, from probably the very early 1990s, and I'm in the time it takes me to think it, I'm like, wait a minute, YouTube, no, there it is. There it is. It's there. I mean, it's amazing.
That's
amazing.
That's one of the most amazing things, really. Other than that, I mean, the laptop has not really changed other than it's faster, it's nicer, it's still the same concept when we're using a PC. We're still doing the same concept that we were 10 years ago. It's just efficiency. Things are far more efficient now than they were.
The machines are more beautiful, right? Thin and light. Obviously, high-res screens, the specs have all improved. USB ports have gotten smaller, that kind of thing. But I mean, there are machine, and maybe we should credit Apple with this as well. I mean, starting with the MacBook Air, the second one in particular, PCs are like attractive too. They're nice. All of the computers that I would travel with at this point, an HP Spectre X360, a Surface Book, an Envy Notebook, whatever, they're beautiful. They're beautiful machines. And that's nice.
Well, how much of an influence do you think that Apple has had in the PC market? If they hadn't come up with the MacBooks and products like that, like the iMac, for example, how much would the PC market still be plagued with gigantic Toshibas?
Definitely. The all-in-one computer I'm using now, a beautiful HP with a curved display, 34 inches. It's astonishing. Would never exist if it weren't for the iMac. It's much more beautiful than an iMac, but they would never have come up with this. So why would you have? And I don't. There's probably a good word for this kind of thing, but the sort of concept I'm getting toward is Apple has an outsized amount of influence given their market share / usage share kind of thing, right? That they may only be 7.5% of the whole PC industry worldwide right now, which they are. But they have a much bigger influence, primarily from a design aesthetic, but also from a, whether it's warranted or not, a sort of it just works / kind of simplicity perspective. I've always, I one of the problems with Windows, and this was a problem in Vista, it was a problem in Windows 8 certainly, was that Microsoft has always offered multiple ways to do something, because they have so many different kinds of customers, and that was just the way they always did it. It's just, well, if you're a power user, you can launch this thing this way, and if you're a normal user, you can use it this way, and and it's kind of nice to serve all those different masters, but it also creates a system that's kind of needlessly complex. Yeah. And on the Mac side in particular, Apple would always say, "This is how you do it. And if you can't figure it out, too bad." It's just, and it seems a little unfriendly. It hasn't really bit them too bad, and I think you see Microsoft trying to hone the vision. When you see PC makers doing the same thing. I mean, they don't really reach Apple's level of aesthetic ever, but
why do you think it is? Do you think it's the fact that they're the PC makers are making so much more product. Like why can't HP, for example, reinvent their brand and say, you know what, we're going to make, this is the type of products we're making. We're going to become a premium brand. Is it not cost effective for them? Do they fear that they would lose something on the lower end of the market?
Yeah, I mean, there's a market reality where HP or Dell or anybody is not going to make the same amount of money on a PC that Apple is, and the reason is just that PCs are a commodity business, and you could say, look, this thing's $2,000, but it's 2,000 times better than the thing that's $300, and the truth is it isn't. It's a couple times better, but there's nothing really competing. Once you decide to go the Apple route, you just sort of say, well, they only make premium devices, so it's going to be great. On the PC side, there's a lot of crap devices, and so you have to kind of compete with that. It's tough because people have a hard time spending money when they feel like they don't have to.
Yeah,
it's kind of a
listen, I have to buy a new laptop, and I'm dredging that moment. Dreading that moment that I have to spend about $2,500 and buy a stupid Mac.
Well.
You know what I mean? Like I don't want to do that, but in reality, I don't. That's what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, then don't worry about it. Why dread it?
Because I don't want to spend the money. Yeah, I don't want to spend the money.
Okay.
It's a screwed up situation I'm in. No, I want the best, but I don't want to spend the money.
I want the best, but right. Well, okay.
And I want it now.
Sorry. I almost said there's only one Mercedes, but then I thought, actually, there's a BMW too.
There's a BMW also. Well, listen, Lincoln is trying to get back in that market. I don't know if you saw the auto show. Lincoln and Buick are trying to get in that, Mercedes competitor
the Dells of the car world. I'm sure it will be no time at all before we perceive those to be beautiful luxury
Can that be a quote in like autobuyermagazine.com? It's like Paul Thurrott, the Buicks, the Dells of the car world.
The Dell of the car world. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's just dull, whatever.
Hey, guys, we still have a lot to talk about, but before we continue, I want to talk about our Patreon campaign. If you want to help the show, you want to support the show, you can throw us a couple bones by going to patreon.com/whatthetech. We provide you guys with a bonus show that we record after the show each and every week. If you're watching live, guys, we broadcast the show live for free. We don't charge you a dime. If you want to watch it on demand, you go to patreon.com/whatthetech and fund us. Every penny counts. We have so many upgrades to do, and this entire studio is falling apart at this point. I need to buy diapers also. It's a whole crazy world that I'm in, Paul. Diapers and studio stuff. It never ends. Formula. I just spent $120 on formula. For me, not the baby.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
It's good with rum.
Yeah, it's very good with rum. So patreon.com/whatthetech. You can support us there. Also, if you want to help us out, it doesn't cost you a dime. Whenever you buy something on Amazon, use our link, gfq.co/Amazon. That's gfq.co/Amazon. We also have it on our website at gfqnetwork.com. Click on it, bookmark it, and whenever you buy something on Amazon, you go to Amazon, click on that link, and purchase your products that way. And we get like 2% from every sale, and it really goes a long way at the end of the year. I had to redo all these lights, and I use that. So I want to thank everyone for listening to that plug. Let's see. Windows 10 becomes a recommended update on Windows 7 and Windows 8.1. How is this changing from what it already does, Paul?
So I don't remember the exact timing, but sometime late last year, so say it was probably November, end of October, November, somewhere around there, Microsoft made Windows 10 available through Windows Update as an optional update in Windows 7 or Windows 8.1. So most users would never even see it. And they would certainly never be prompted by it through Windows Update. Obviously, Windows 10 has other methods to get its cold fingers on your computer, but through Windows Update anyway.
Yeah.
At the time, they announced that sometime in early 2016 they were going to change its status to a recommended update in Windows Update. That changes things a lot because most Windows installs out in the world are configured to automatically install recommended updates. Mm-hmm. This is kind of a tricky one because I actually think for most Windows 7 and Windows 8.1 users, you probably do want recommended updates. Although, I guess I'd also say at this point in time, what you're probably seeing most days is just critical security updates anyway, which are beyond, they're critical, they're not recommended, so it doesn't really matter. It's not going to install on you by mistake or anything like that. You still get prompted. You still have to say okay. But it's an escalation, right, of what they've been doing all along, which is very aggressively trying to convince people to upgrade to Windows 10. So it falls into that category. It's another step. It was something they did announce. This was not a sudden thing. I mean, they never said the exact date, but they announced this in very late October, I think it was. And then yesterday they said, okay, we're turning on that faucet, because they want to keep the Windows 10 upgrade numbers going. So I think ultimately it's not going to impact too many people. I think the real damage done on consumers was already done. That Windows 10 advertisement thing. I think that's the big push, and I think that's the thing most people, are going to see. But you can see it in Windows Update too. So who knows? Next time you open Word 2013, it will say, "Hey, Word's pretty good, but can we get you into some Windows 10?" Who knows? I don't know where they go from
I
here.
don't know. I still have a couple machines here that I had to do the update, and listen, guys, just do the update. Just give up. Just
so we can
put your
stop
white flag.
complaining about it.
Stick up the white flag and wave it, and just surrender and just do the update at this point.
Yep.
That's the best advice I could give you. Apple
Sorry.
Apple Eyes March 15th event for iPhone 5 SE. I hope that is not the name. The iPad Air 3 and Apple Watch updates.
That name is so terrible. I think we can all agree that's going to be the name.
Right?
Really, it's such a terrible name.
What does the E stand for?
I'm enhanced,
environmental, eco.
I don't know. Yeah, I really wish they wouldn't do that. But yeah, I mean, so I guess, and I have to guess because it's Apple, but obviously they're doing this thing midstream. The iPhone 6S and 6S Plus have not sold well enough, although they've sold. I mean, that's a crazy thing to say, but I should say, let me finish the sentence. They have not sold well enough within the user base of people who have the smaller phones, right? So if you have an iPhone 4S or older, it's like, what is it, 3.5 inch screen? Right?
4S is 3.55 is 4, yeah.
And then the iPhone 5 and the 5C. Was there a 5S?
There was a 5S, yes.
I think I had that one, actually.
Yeah.
All right, so let's say a 5S, and a 5C had a 4.2, 4 point something.
I think it was 4.
screen.
I think it was 4.
Oh, that was the 4-inch one. Okay.
Yeah.
These are small screens. So according to Apple, like 60% of its user base hasn't upgraded, right? So rather than call this thing what did you say it was going to be called? The 5S?
The 5SE.
So they're not going to call it a 6SE, right? Which is kind of goofy. But I think what they're indicating there is the break between not the devices themselves, but the timing. So in other words, that in the fall, when they release a 7 and a 7 and a 7 Plus, they're not going to release another small phone. That the 5SE gets replaced next March or whenever the date is. You know what I mean? I think that's the reason.
I don't know if this is a good thing or, I mean, we kind of touched on this a couple times in the past, but this 4-inch concept that Apple's really sticking to, and I've heard the argument, and listen, I've heard the argument that, women prefer the smaller one because they have smaller hands. And
you're such a misogynist, Andrew.
Listen,
why would you say that? Noted misogynist Andrew Zarian once again.
Yeah. Well, I've been called worse.
Showed his disdain for the small hands of some women.
Yeah. Listen, Jess was one of those people that she did not want to get the bigger phone. She didn't want the 6 because it was too big. I asked her, and
admit this. You know this. Like
she didn't want a bigger phone, and she ended up getting it.
You look at phones, right? When you're out, you see people out in the world. You're in bars or whatever, and you look at their phones, right?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes. Yes.
You notice that a lot of them are these tiny iPhones.
I see a lot of those tiny iPhones. I just think and you know what? All the screens are cracked also. What does that say?
They're stupid on many levels. But no, I mean, the reason this is interesting is that a year ago you could say, well, they're not on the upgrade path yet, right? They're holding out because they know the S versions are coming, and that's when their contract expires.
Yeah.
But now we can't say that anymore. And he and Tim Cook just said like last week, 60% of people with those devices have still not upgraded to 6 or 6S. So
is the argument that they're not upgrading because of the screen size?
That's a theory.
That's a theory.
Right?
I don't think that's an accurate theory. I really don't.
I think you don't.
No, I don't. I'll tell you why. I know a lot of people with these phones, with the 4S. They've hung on to the 4S. My bartender, Diana, she just upgraded. She had a 4S.
Seriously, I would need a permanent like magnifying lens on top of it to see that screen now.
Oh, it's tiny.
How could you even use this thing?
Well, I'll tell you what happened with her. She had a 4S. She had a 5. She lost it. She ended up getting a 4S.
Yeah.
Okay. So she was with that phone for like a year until a contract. She got a new contract, whatever the case was. And I was talking to her before she upgraded. She was going to get the new iPhone. She got a 6. She got a 6S. Before she's like, I really don't want the bigger phone. I use it. It's like really big. I like the iPhone 5 size. And I was like, listen, just give it like a week and you're used to it. She had it for a week. She goes, oh my God, I love this thing. I'm like, how does it compare to the smaller phone? She goes, I can never use that. I can never use a smaller phone now.
The 6 and the 6S, I think, are small, right? If you sort of accept it, you don't have to accept.
Well, I don't think the 6S is small. Well, yeah, the 6 and the 6S are small for me. Yeah,
that's what I mean. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Because in the broader world outside of Apple, 5 inches plus these days it's like 5.2.
Listen, this phone is 5.1. This phone is 5.1, and this is small for me. I don't like it.
That's a standard, but that's a standard, right? The iPhone, the Lumia 950 is a 5-inch device. It's small. I think it's small. Like a 4.7 device is tiny. To me, that's getting tiny. I'm not saying. I think there's a I think you can go too big. Like 6 inches, I think is still too big. We've never gotten to the point where that makes any sense. But the 5.5 you see on like the Plus iPhones, the 5.7-ish that you see like on the Nexus 6P or the other big phones, I think that's that's phablet, right? I mean, I think that's normal. It's funny how iPhone people tend toward the smaller devices. Like
I think it's because I really think it has to do with the fact that this is what people know and this is what they're used to, and anything different is a big problem. You know, we saw the same complaint from the iOS from when iOS changed from iOS 6 to 7. People hated the aesthetics of it. Listen, it wasn't great, but it wasn't to the point that, oh my God, I'm going to throw my hands up in the air and start screaming about the overall design of this. I really think it has to do with change.
By the way, the first version, iOS 7, was really stark, and I think what they should have done is done a more kind of measured transition to that. I think that was kind of like a slap to the face. You know, they've cleaned it up in 8 and 9.
They fixed it up. Yeah, they fixed it, but I don't think it was.
That first one, that must have seriously. We went from leather-looking surfaces and goofy things, and then to this. I mean, crazy white Bauhaus.
Again, I don't think this is a forward, going forward for Apple. I don't think this is a great move. I think this is just Apple playing it safe and thinking that this is why people aren't upgrading. I don't think this is the reason. I think people have other reasons. Maybe they don't have the money to go buy an iPhone. I mean, the fact of the matter is the rumored price is $450 for a 16 gig version of this variant of the 5S. That's still obscene. I mean, $450 for a 4-inch phone.
Listen, I can't even fight this battle anymore. Apple does what they do, and there's nothing we can do.
How about,
I agree.
How about instead of making a smaller phone, right? Instead of saying, okay, well, you know what, people aren't upgrading, they're hanging on to these iPhone 5s. The reason is because we made these bigger phones, and people don't want to get a bigger phone. Instead of doing that, why not have a 6C? Have it cheap. Have it for $300, $399. Have it plasticky. Don't do the aluminum look, and have that on the market. I guarantee all these people are going to jump on that. $299. How about have a $299 phone?
Well,
make it cheaper. Have a slower. Put slower hardware in there. Don't put the latest chipset in there. Put a couple generations behind. Have it have the look. You don't need a retina display on this thing, and sell it.
You're not thinking clearly, Andrew. Let me. You're talking like a normal person. Apple doesn't do things that way. They're a luxury brand. That's like saying, Ferrari. If you could, I don't know, make a $30,000 car, you'd probably sell a bunch of them. It's. That's not their market. They're not a Ferrari, not really. I mean, obviously they're. Yeah. But they just don't. They explored making a netbook at one point. And what they ultimately decided was that, by the way, Apple would have made in the scope of a netbook would have made a beautiful netbook, but it would have been a netbook and it would have been a piece of crap. And that's not really the type of thing that they do. And they're selective in ways that you and I don't understand. I'm not trying to say I have the answer. Like, I don't. I wish they would. I wish they would make this $300 phone you're describing. It sounds wonderful, but that's not how they do things. And by the way, they're the biggest maker of the second biggest maker of smartphones in the world. And from a profit standpoint, they make more money than the rest of the industry combined.
Sure.
In fact, they make all the money, So, we can sort of complain about this stuff because we're like consumer focused, but the truth is Apple is Apple focused, and Apple's strategy is working great. And it's just, there's no fighting it.
I don't know. Do you think that this is going to be a huge seller for them? Do you think this is going to bring those people? I mean, your honest opinion about this, like all the theories are right there why people aren't upgrading. The phones are too big. This is too, a 4-inch version of the iPhone current in 2016. Is that something that will sell?
I don't know. Apple understands these customers better than we do, right? So they know two things. They do know how many of those people haven't upgraded because of the size of the phone, right? And I do think there's a sizable percentage of them, whatever it is. But obviously there is some. If they're making this phone, there is some.
But they're going to have to upgrade eventually. And I don't think these people are going to go to Android.
Right. But what they don't want to upgrade to is a 2-3-year-old iPhone 5S, which is the only choice they have right now. And so you put some modern internals inside of this thing. We're thinking of, or at least I am, and I think you are too, thinking of small phone as like lesser phone. The way to approach this phone is, no, it's just an iPhone. It just has a small screen. Some people like that screen. It doesn't have to be, it'll probably be cheaper just by virtue of the fact that the screens are cheaper, but it's not like an entry-level phone. It's just a smaller screen phone.
Yeah.
Apple made that mistake when they did the iPhone 5C, when they said, unapologetically plastic. That was actually the problem with the iPhone 5C. See, to me, the problem was the price. I looked at that thing and I said, that thing should cost, like you said, $300. It should be, that's what that should be. But the thing that Apple got wrong with that device was actually the quality of it. It's not that it wasn't high quality. For that material, actually, it was a nice little, it was an attractive device. And I see those out in the world sometimes. I still think they're Lumias because of the design. Yeah. And so you see someone using one in a cafe or something like we did over the weekend, and it's like, oh, look, there's a guy. Oh, no, that's an iPhone. Damn it. But I think for their world, plastic's not a premium material. So you'll notice they don't do that anymore, and they won't. They can do colored metals. There are those.
I like the plastic. To be honest, I did not hate the plastics. I
didn't
iPhone.
either.
Yeah.
Yep.
I thought those they were onto something with that 5C when they put it out. It wasn't bad at all. I know people that went and bought it because they thought it looked cool, and then they put that weird looking case on it.
Yeah. I don't see those cases a lot, by the way.
Yeah.
I do. I see iPhone 5Cs occasionally. I don't know that I've ever. I must have seen one or two, but I can't remember. The times I've seen them recently. Those cases, I don't think were big. I don't think they were a big seller.
I'm actually looking forward to the Samsung S7 that they're going to be putting out.
I don't know.
Lower megapixels, but better sensor.
Yeah, I'm not. That doesn't concern me. I think they'll get that right. They've been doing a good job with the cameras. I just don't know what Samsung can do. Samsung, in many ways, is the not Buick. What was the other car? Lincoln. They're kind of like the Lincoln, right? Where they have a harder time selling luxury, I think, than Apple does. That it's not because the materials aren't all there. It's not because the quality isn't there. I mean, although people could debate that kind of stuff. But they have that. It's the PC problem. You're competing in a market of Android devices where you can get a $300 or a sub $300. You can get a $100 Android phone. Yeah. And so, selling a device that costs as much as an iPhone, which those things do, they have a problem because I think in that part of the market, a lot of people would say, why not just get an iPhone? Why am I buying something that's just like an iPhone?
Listen, I probably would be happy if I didn't do this. I probably would have an iPhone. I mean, the reality is there would be no reason for me not to have an iPhone. I'm already in the ecosystem. I have a Mac. I have an iPad. It's actually ridiculous that I don't have an iPhone. But I need, I have an iPhone 5S actually that I use every now and then. That's enough for me.
It's enough for me in my tiny doll hands.
Yeah, look, I have tiny hands, Paul. Look, I am their demo. Look at this. I'm their
it's like
demo.
a Tyrannosaurus Rex trying to play the violin. Tyrannosaurus jazz hands.
So, Paul, what do you have coming up before we wrap up? Anything new in the world of Paul Thurrott?
No.
Nothing, huh?
No.
You're coming to New York?
Trips, finally, yeah, some New York trips.
You'll be in New York Thursday and Friday.
I just booked Build. We're going to San Francisco at the very end of March. We'll have like a live Windows Weekly thing, I'm sure, that Friday probably. Is that April Fool's Day? That would be perfect. It might be. Yes, it is. Yeah, that's about it. That's as far out as I can see.
Excellent.
End of March.
Excellent. I got nothing going on either.
You? Nothing? Well, you don't. Of course, you have everything going on. You have a kid.
I have a kid. I have I haven't slept in days. I'm delirious. I got to pick my cat up from the vet now. It's a whole thing. It's an entire thing that's happening. It's horrible.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, horrible. Life is rough right now. But hey, guys, if you're watching live, stay tuned. We're going to be doing our post show right after this. If you're not, again, you could fund us, patreon.com/whatthetech. You can go there. Also use our Amazon link, gfk.co/Amazon, bookmark it. Whenever you make a purchase, we get credit from that. It's very easy. All things Paul Thurrott, go to Thurrott.com. Paul also does a phenomenal show every Wednesday on the Twit Network called Windows Weekly. Also, what else? People can follow you on Twitter at Thurrott. Anything else? No projects? No books?
No, I mean, we're going to be updating the Windows 10 book as we go. It seems to be going pretty well, actually. It's nice not having to handle any of the finance stuff, so that's been good. But no, I don't think any new books for a while. I think we're going to focus on Windows 10.
Yeah.
I can tell you what I won't be expanding into is a phone book.
You're not doing a Windows Phone book? No?
Probably not, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, my cat has been in the vet for a week now. It's been
Thanks.
I could have bought 2 cars at this point.
Yep.
Yeah, I could have bought two 1990 something Honda Civics. Would have been better off. All right.
We should state everything in iPhones. How many iPhones could you have
Oh
purchased?
God. Okay. Which iPhone are we talking about?
That's just a
16
6S
gig.
mid-level.
16 gig.
No.
64
gig.
Let's see. How much are iPhones now?
It's gonna be like $750 somewhere in there.
I could have bought 2 iPhones.
2 iPhones.
I could have bought
two
2
iPhones worth of cat repairs.
Yeah.
And every time you look at that animal, I want you to think to yourself, 2 iPhones.
I could have had 2 iPhones if I didn't spend it on this cat. All right, guys. Stay tuned if you're watching live. If not, we'll see you all next week. Take care.